Hi, did you know that Devil May Cry was originally going to be Resident Evil 4? I know! Crazy, right? Good, now that we've gotten that out the way, let's get on with the video.
Let's rock, baby.
It's not an understatement to say that we've got a pretty good assortment of character action games these days. We've even got some titles that blur the lines of what character action really means, which makes the term extremely difficult to really define. If we were to say that a character action game merely features a witty protagonist defeating enemies in stylish ways using some kind of third-person combat system, we could include a wide variety of titles that have plenty of nuanced differences. To me, character action simply describes a gameplay system that gives you a tool set which is entirely unique to the character you're playing as, allowing you to fully embody that character during gameplay. Instead of merely progressing through each level to get to the end, you're meaningfully engaging with the combat in an immersive way right in the shoes of your character. This can still apply to a huge variety of games, but as long as it embodies that spirit, I think I'd be fine calling it a character action game. The first Devil May Cry is arguably the first of its kind in terms of character action games as we know them today, and while the first in the series is a bit rough around the edges, you can see the core ideas of character action at play. And if this little pop-up in the top right didn't already make that clear, this is a game that rewards you for playing as well as the main character would. But beyond encouraging the player to be a stylish little bitch, I'm sorry, you didn't deserve that. This game is hard. Like, if you aren't paying attention to what your enemies are doing, you can die very easily. So playing stylishly isn't exactly a choice here. It's really more of a necessity that just so happens to line up with playing the game well. And I think that makes Devil May Cry's first entry hold up to the test of time. This is still a really engaging game with tight controls, some really cool scenarios, and a handful of boss fights that feel amazing to perfect. But there are definitely more than a few problems here as well, particularly when it comes to level design and some of the controls. None of this stuff is something I hate the game for, but it does hamper my desire to revisit the game often. But even with that, you can still find plenty here to enjoy. Now I know that this is extremely common knowledge at this point, but we do have to get into the fact that Devil May Cry was originally a Resident Evil game. Shinji Mikami, creator of Resident Evil, had requested that Hideki Kamiya create a new entry into the Resident Evil franchise, with it being the original concept for Resident Evil 4. But Kamiya wanted to make something more stylish and action-focused than Resident Evil games had been up to that point. But what the team created didn't really feel anything like a Resident Evil game, and instead of completely scrapping the project, it evolved into something new. This then led to Team Little Devils, a group of staff from Capcom Production Studio 4, to set the game in a completely new universe. One that was partly inspired by Dante Alighieri's Divine Comedy, just with
Smoking sexy style!
It may seem obvious just by looking at it, but there is definitely still some Resident Evil DNA here, and it becomes almost instantly clear right at the start when you enter the castle for the first time. The music establishes a very unsettling mood, and the grandiose architecture is imposing. But what makes things creepier is that there's no one here, no enemies to fight or many things to interact with, and there are lots of smaller moments like this throughout the game. The first Devil May Cry feels extremely experimental, especially in comparison to the later games in the series, but it does all that while still creating a combat system that feels pretty revolutionary even right now. The emphasis on showmanship, perfection, and completely dunking on your foes is what makes Devil May Cry so satisfying even to this day. Fundamentally, there's a lot here that works perfectly, and it all starts with Dante. Devil May Cry opens on a Star Wars-esque opening crawl, but don't worry, we're not dealing with trade route politics this time around. Although saying that, it would be pretty funny to see how that works in this universe. This opening crawl is complete with over-the-top narration and a demon practicing his sword swings in front of some fire. This guy here is Spada, a legendary demon who decided that his fellow demons were sort of assholes. So he decided that humans were cooler and chose to live with them instead, protecting humanity from demons and assumedly kicking ass in his spare time. It then cuts to a darkly lit street with someone who jumped all the way from the moon to find the coolest store in town, Devil May Cry. Dante is the sole owner of this business, where he offers his services to those that want demons dead. The very first thing that you'll learn about Dante is that he's an idiot.
Whoa, slow down, babe.
It's here we learn that Dante's mother and brother were killed by a demon called Mundus, and that Dante is the son of Spada. Trish is here to help Dante get revenge, and together they make for Malay Island, where the Demon King is waiting. What follows from here is a game that, at first, veers away from the spectacle of the opening and has you walking around a big room looking for orbs. Yeah, this isn't the most exciting way to start a game about killing hordes of demons in cool ways, but it does help you get used to the game's feel and controls. And I argue that you need this since the game uses fixed camera angles, and for some it can be hard to get to grips with at first. Luckily, it isn't too long before we get to some action. And interestingly, the first few combat scenarios are in these super enclosed spaces. Here you don't really need to worry about spacing or distance, you can just wail away on your enemies and get a feel for the basics of combat. But then, the next main battle takes place in this gigantic room, where the game starts to teach you about certain things. For one thing, Dante's base movement speed is quite slow, and he's not fast enough to run from one enemy to another that's far away, while also maintaining the style meter. It also establishes that some of Dante's attacks can send enemies flying backwards, causing a gap that's hard to close immediately. And since we're on about style, the style meter in this game is extremely bare bones in comparison to later entries in the series. For starters, the ranks only go from D to S, which is also the case for Devil May Cry 2. And then there isn't much to get you excited as the ranks actually go up. They just sort of appear on screen unceremoniously, and they disappear extremely quickly too. It's still nice to have because scoring an S rank still makes my brain feel good, but we're not at the point yet where the style system has really come into its own yet. The first few areas establish a careful balance to the combat that remains that way throughout the game, and if you take a few hits here and there, you also find out that Dante is a bit of a glass cannon and can die pretty quickly, so it's important to stay immobile, keep attacking, and make use of enemy step to leap off enemies and create distance between yourself and them. Later on, you fight a dozen more enemies down a lengthy corridor, and a lot of these micro lessons are put to the test. The controls themselves are not hard to get to grips with. One button swings your sword, another fires Dante's guns, while another makes him jump. There are also some alternate sword combos you can execute by delaying the third swing in the combo. A short delay will make Dante perform 2 quick slashes before swiping down, while a long delay allows Dante to perform his million stabs attack. Locking onto an enemy allows some extra inputs to be done while moving the analog stick in a certain direction. The key controls are all centralized to the triangle, square, and X button, but the exact move can be altered with the control stick. Overall, it's a simple control scheme and one that I've always found to be very intuitive. However, there's one thing that can be tricky to get your head around. The direction to move the analog stick is actually relative to whichever way Dante is facing. For instance, if he's facing the left, then to dodge to his right, you'll need to move the stick up, and to do high time, you need to pull the stick left. If you're just starting out with DMC, it can take a while to adjust. And it's strange because the circle button only interacts with doors and picks up items and also shoots the guns. But since Square already does that, it would have made sense to put a dedicated dodge button on the circle button. Now there is one game in this series that does just that, and I'll leave it to you to figure out which one that is. Hint? It's not a good one. Propelling the idea of style even further is the Taunt System. By pushing down the right trigger, Dante can taunt his enemies. Doing this stops the style gauge from dropping entirely, and it's handy if you want a short break from attacking enemies. Taunting also helps to fill up Dante's devil trigger gauge, giving you an actual reason to use it during combat. And this is something you're going to want to do because devil trigger is absolutely busted in a good way. If an enemy is causing you trouble, there's nothing more satisfying than popping the devil trigger and going to town on it. In this form, you gain increased damage and your health slowly recovers. What's strange is that the devil trigger is dependent on which weapon you have equipped. Force Edge, Dante's starting weapon, doesn't have a devil trigger, but the second weapon you find in the game, Alistor, does. Ifrit, a fiery set of gauntlets, also comes with a devil trigger, and they share different properties that suit their movesets. Alistor's devil trigger increases Dante's movement speed, whereas Ifrit's only increases his damage. Now is probably a good time to talk about upgrades, but don't get too excited because there isn't really all that much here. There are some cool upgrades like Round Trip, which lets Dante hurl his sword like a boomerang, or an upgrade to Devil Trigger that lets him fly and cast lightning bolts, but there are only a handful of extra abilities to use, and while that doesn't make Devil May Cry's combat any less engaging, it does mean that variety is limited. But since there's an unlockable double jump, I'm going to stop complaining now. This all contributes to a combat system that is, above all else, simple. There aren't any long combo strings to remember, no mechanic that requires a high level of execution to succeed. It's all extremely easy to engage with. The difficulty comes from using this simplicity to create satisfying combos and engage enemies in concise ways. And this all comes together especially well in some of the boss fights. The first fight is against Phantom, a giant lava spider, and I love this boss because it teaches you that sometimes defense is more important than offense. His entire body is covered in armor, so any attacks to his face or sides will just bounce off. However, he's vulnerable on his back and when he opens his mouth, so carefully timed jump attacks can absolutely decimate him. Then we have Nello Angelo, a fight against someone who uses many of the same techniques that Dante uses. These fights are very fast-paced and require quick and adaptive thinking to counter a lot of his attacks. This boss is absolutely the best that Devil May Cry has to offer and showcases how satisfying this combat system really can be. But for the majority of the game, you're not going to really be dealing with bosses. Instead, most of the runtime is taken up with light exploration, puzzle solving, and combat encounters interspersed throughout. And instead of being one large ongoing experience, the game is instead split up into missions, 23 in total. I remember being weirded out when I played this game for the first time, since it felt jarring to have each bit of progression broken up by this screen. You could argue that it interrupts the pacing of the game, but I'd argue the opposite. The mission structure lets the game focus on what it does best, which is short bursts of fast-paced action alongside light exploration. Each mission gives you an extremely simple goal to solve, and the level design is straightforward for the most part, so there isn't much downtime running around levels that could be better spent beating up some demons. But some of these missions are hilarious. Most of them are pretty beefy and last somewhere between 10 to 15 minutes on your first time, and then there are levels like Mission 13 that have you swimming around for about a minute and then the mission just ends. It's not really an issue, it's just kind of funny that someone could be like, I'll do one more mission and then I'll go to sleep, and then go, I suppose it's not really a problem that each level varies so much in length, but it can be annoying if you're looking for a more consistent experience. And since we're talking about level design, let's get into some of the things that this game doesn't do so well. Following on from its prior existence as a Resident Evil game, there are numerous occasions where you need some kind of key to proceed, or maybe there's something you need to interact with and it's locked behind a barrier of some kind. This is when you need to go off and explore a tiny bit, and it's here that the game can feel a bit messy. It's very easy to get lost as you explore Malay Island and try to uncover its secrets. And it's not because the location is massive or anything, it's more that the game doesn't really give you amazing hints about where to go. It can be pretty vague at times regarding what you need to do, and the context clues given to you by exploring the castle aren't quite enough to nudge you along. Situations like these are thankfully spread out throughout the game, so it isn't like you'll be stuck with some kind of annoying puzzle every 10 to 15 minutes. It's just that when it does happen, it can interrupt the flow of getting into new combat scenarios, and when you've been aimlessly running around the castle for 10 minutes, it can get annoying. Some parts of the game also require Dante to perform some fairly accurate platforming, and let's just say that this game isn't really built for that. Luckily, the worst thing screwing up a jump can do is cost you a few more seconds, so it's not a big deal to screw one up, but the boss fights against Griffin make platforming a bit more problematic. You just don't have enough control over Dante's jumps to make platforming feel good. Jumping is fine in combat because you're never in need of landing on a very specific spot, but when the game does call for you to make some technical leaps, it can be bothersome. One of the best tools for platforming is using Stinger to leap off of edges. Doing this can save you time as well as help you find secret items. Stinger also just so happens to be the best move in the game. And yes, this game has lots of secrets to uncover, from blue orbs that increase your maximum life to secret missions that also net you blue orbs. Blue orbs really are the one thing you're going to be collecting in this game. To be fair, there are also other handy items to find as well. Vital stars and devil stars replenish Dante's health and devil trigger. Gold orbs let you try a level again from a checkpoint when you die, instead of having to start the level from scratch. Holy water kills most enemies in the immediate area as well as damage bosses. And untouchable gives you invincibility and an indefinite devil trigger for a short while. The secret missions are located in sneaky spots throughout the game, and are essentially just harder micro missions. Some of these are in incredibly hidden spots, with some secrets being extremely difficult to find without really paying attention to the level. Usually I tend to just skip them on replays since it's not like you need the extra blue orbs anyway, but they're cool to hunt down if you feel like that's what you want to do. But that's the core loop of Devil May Cry. You play missions that last anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, battling demons as you go. It's a simple loop, but one that fits the game perfectly. If there was any more than this, then I'd say the game would feel pretty unbalanced. But where does Dante's journey take him on the route to exacting revenge on Mundus? Well, let's find out. It turns out that Malay Island is actually a portal to the demon world, and it's part of Mundus' plan to do some evil stuff. Luckily, this means Dante can use it to head over to Mundus and kick his ass in his own house. But first, Dante needs to collect several items, including a Philosopher's Stone, to actually activate the portal. It's around this time that Dante encounters Nello Angelo for the third and final time. At this point, he's pretty upset that he's lost to Dante so many times, so he gets ready to finish Dante off once and for all. Nello Angelo takes his helmet off and reveals himself to be a guy. This boss fight right here is arguably my favorite in the entire game. It's a frantic battle that provides Dante the perfect chance to flex all of his abilities, and it plays out with a song that exemplifies the pace of the battle. And when it comes to a close and he's beaten for the final time, Nello Angelo is revealed to be none other than Dante's twin brother, Virgil. Not that this means much right now, but it's pretty cool. By fusing together Dante's and Virgil's amulets, which were given to them by their parents, Dante is able to create Spada, the true version of the Force Edge that was the very same sword used by his father. Hilariously, it's not a weapon I ever use at this point in the game. Sure, it has the best damage out of each of the weapons, but it doesn't have a devil trigger, so I don't really want it. It has some cool quirks, like having a huge amount of range when performing Stinger, and extra damage, but it's not something that I ever use. Eventually, Dante gets into the demon world, and it's revealed that Trish, yes, she really is barely in the game, I don't blame you if you forgot her, is planning to betray Dante, and that she's secretly working for Mundus. This betrayal plays out in a pretty cool way, as it happens during a boss fight against Nightmare. It's not much of a problem, of course, and Dante kills it anyway. This causes some rubble to fall, and as Trish is about to get squashed, Dante saves her life. And this is where things get a little bit weird. Dante saves Trish because she apparently looks identical to his mother, and this is something he doesn't seem to question. Why? We also get some really dorky dialogue here, and it's great.
Dante!
Don't come any closer, you devil!
Dante then moves on to face Mundus himself, and the area you find him in is really cool. The stark white color scheme with the organs playing in the background is a jarring contrast to the fleshy design of the rest of the demon world. Dante, jazzed up from that sweet feeling of revenge, forgets that Mundus is a pretty big deal in these parts. And since she sort of failed to kill Dante, Trish is used to distract Dante while Mundus tries to kill him himself. But as he winds up for the killing blow, Trish manages to simply leap out and take the shot for him, sacrificing herself in the process. No, we're not there yet. Just give it a minute. Now this really gets the revenge juices pumping. So Dante transforms into his true demon form, which heavily resembles Spada, and the two do battle. The first part of this fight is a battle in disguise as Dante flies towards Mundus, blasting him with energy balls. I am not a huge fan of this part since it takes a while, and taking too much damage here can really screw you over for the second part. The goal for the fight is to destroy these 4 orbs hovering around Mundus so you can deal damage to him, and by using the devil trigger, Dante can summon a spectral dragon to attack Mundus and deal massive damage. And no, that thing, that never happens again. The second phase of the fight is much more normal in comparison and just requires Dante to carefully navigate the area to avoid the lava and jump up onto the platform to attack Mundus directly. This fight is a cakewalk if you have Untouchable, which I certainly use this time around since it makes Mundus paste in a matter of seconds. And that's it for the fight. It's admittedly a bit underwhelming, but I'm not really sure how you'd make a fight like this super engaging in Devil May Cry's combat system. I think the fights when it's Dante versus someone of equal skill level will always be king, or fights that require a different strategy like Phantom. Either way, Mundus is finally dead, and we are treated with this classic scene.
I should have saved you.
I should have been the one to fill your dark soul with light!
And it's here that we can talk about some of the characterization that Dante gets given in this game. As we all know by now, Dante likes to put on a show. He loves to embarrass the demons he fights, and is able to back up that talk with genuine skill and finesse. But beneath all that is a character with a tragic past that still affects him daily. There are more than a few times in Devil May Cry where you can see the mask that Dante wears start to slip away, which makes him a far more interesting character than if he were to just be the guy who makes the funny jokes sometimes and makes quips constantly. There's a genuine sadness to Dante, and it's what makes him work so well, and it's why certain scenes are so engaging, no matter how corny they end up being. And sure, Trish's death scene here is extremely cheesy, but it makes sense for Dante to entirely drop the facade of being a funny demon killer when there's no one around to laugh with him. But now, in typical Metroid fashion, Dante has to escape Malay Island because it's about to explode for some reason. And even though you don't have to travel far, it's still a pretty fun sequence. It all goes well until the floor gives way and you're stuck in the sewers again, with Mundus revealing that he still lives. Dante then makes one final attempt to take the demon down, but he's not quite strong enough to do it. Luckily, Trish is still alive. Yeah, I know, it's not really that surprising. And together, they are able to kill Mundus once and for all.
It looks like we have a winner.
Jackpot.
Cue an escape sequence where they manage to find an airplane, and we've beaten the game. I don't really have anything negative to say about the story in this game. It's a simple tale of revenge with a quirky tone and fun main character. It also lays the groundwork for the rest of the series to build on in interesting ways. However, there is something that I need to point out here. Why in the hell did Dante ever think that Devil Never Cry is a better name for his business than Devil May Cry? Like, seriously, Thankfully, this is never brought up ever again, and it's called Devil May Cry in every other entry. But for completionists, the game isn't over quite yet. Beating the game once unlocks hard mode, which also works as a New Game Plus and lets you carry over all of your abilities. You can also unlock a Spada outfit for Dante to make him look like his father, complete with Spada's true form and Devil Trigger. This also unlocks a new weapon to use, the Yamato, which is a katana that effectively acts the same way as Alastor. And those who know where the story in the series eventually goes knows how cool Yamato's inclusion is in this game. There's also an even harder difficulty, fittingly called Dante Must Die, and if you can't already tell, yes, this is difficult. But that's it for Devil May Cry. It's got a few rough edges, but it's still a game I really enjoy playing through. Even after all this time, the combat still feels fresh and satisfying, and even though a few boss fights are designed annoyingly, others are fun and put the system to the test. This is still a unique Devil May Cry game when it comes to its atmosphere too, since it's so closely tied to its past as a Resident Evil game. It crosses the line between the two in so many interesting ways. Looking back on it now, it's really cool to see how integral this game still is to the overall Devil May Cry storyline, and it sets up Dante and his arc pretty perfectly. They really started off strong with this game, and there's no way that they could have messed it up with the sequel.